Hello, I'm Joe Lenton from Original Art Photography, and today we're going to have a look at using layers in Photoshop to add texture and interest to an image. So here's our original starting image, and this is what we're going to process it into. The original starting image was shot using a couple of lights. The main one was from above, as you can tell from the shadow around the bottom of the poppy. So a light directly overhead, and then there was another light at the background, just making sure that everything in the background would be nice and white and clean. So as it stands a little bit of a boring photo, I shot it with the idea in mind of adding things, adding textures later on in Photoshop. So I wanted a very simple composition that I could then work with plenty of space around the sides here. It's been shot at a very wide aperture, giving us quite a shallow depth of field on there, f3.5, I think, if I remember rightly. So let's go over into Photoshop. So there is our poppy. Now, what I've also taken pictures of are various things to use as textures. So we've got, for example, this one here, which is a picture of a floor tile. And I would advise you, when you're using textures, to try and create your own if you can. Yes, you can get free ones online or buy packs of them and so on. But I'd advise you to try creating your own. It's good for your photography skills, and also means if you ever enter into a competition, you're never going to have a problem with any aspect of the image not being your own. The issue you have with using other people's, of course, is you're then using other people's photos within your own photo. So if you're thinking of entering it into any competitions, make sure you shoot your own textures. And you can find them around the house, and you can find them in all sorts of places. So this is just a tile that happens to be on our kitchen floor is tiled like this. So I took a photograph of that particular texture. And this one here is a photograph of a slate that we have in the dining room, that you just put sort of something hot on when it comes through, or it can be used as a sort of a place mat for dining. It's just a piece of slate there, and again you can see some interesting sort of textures going on with that. And finally, I just took a picture from an old book, from an old Bible there, just to add some of the words over the top like that. So we've got those three different textured layers, which I've brought over into Photoshop to create this image. Now, when you're adding in your textures, you need to experiment a little bit with the blend modes to get exactly what you're after. So, for example, the first thing that I put in here was this one of the kitchen tile, and this is on multiply. Now, what happens if you put it on normal? Oops, that's dissolve, which is not very nice. And you can see on normal, you get a slightly different effect on the poppy than you do if you put it onto multiply. You do it on multiply, and the poppy keeps more of its detail, which is what I wanted. So that's why I went for that particular blend mode. And it's worth experimenting with various different ones to see what you get. You've got, like, for example, when you use the high pass filter to do your sharpening, you'll often use the soft light mode to blend over it. But you'll see here, it really does disappear into the background an awful lot. There's not much you can see, and because this is already quite out of focus here, it's hard to appreciate that actually there is some texture being added in. So if I switch it on and off, you can see that it is just affecting the poppy a bit there. So if you wanted that very subtle effect, then that might work. But in this particular case, with this particular image, I think multiply is the most effective blending mode to use for that. In different images, you want to experiment with the blending modes to find out what's going to work best for you. I also noticed there's a little bit of a chip in the tile up there, so I then just fixed that in layer one, just using the healing brush on a blank layer. The next thing that I added in was our photograph of that book, the Bible text, and I've left it on its side like this because I don't really want it sort of intruding too much into the image, so that you're desperately trying to read it. It's more sort of adding a layer of interest like that. And the blending mode I've used this time is the soft light mode, and you can see that the black of the text just comes through quite nicely on there. You could change that to normal, but you'll see that that is a little bit too strong an effect. So I found that the soft light seemed to work best for me, and I also as you can see, that would have been full opacity, and I brought it down to about 42, 43 thereabouts on the opacity, just to take it down so it's not too strong. You'll also see that I've got a little layer mask next to it here. If I switch off the layer mask, you'll see what it's done is it's just taken out this text that was obscuring the head of the poppy there. So just painted a little bit of black onto a layer mask just to bring out the detail in the poppy again, so the text isn't getting in the way. The next layer is the slate. You can see what I've done there with it being masked out a bit. I've decided that I wanted to, instead of just putting a standard vignette on it, I wanted to actually use the slate to add extra texture as well as to darken it down. And you can see that I've got a layer mask on it, which is removing that area in the middle there so that it makes the middle bit that little bit brighter, and we can still see the poppy nice and neatly, because without it everything goes a bit too dark. So it's effectively acting as a vignette, but a sort of a textured vignette, if you like. And that is on multiply mode. Again, you can play around with them. Normal there, I felt that was perhaps a little bit insipid. You can try with the soft light, but then it seems to basically vanish. So I was playing around with that, and I thought, well, you know, the multiply mode works quite nicely. If you find it's a little bit too dark, you can always change your opacity a little bit on there, bring that down a touch if you want to. And then finally, I've just done a curves adjustment layer for the whole thing, and you can see there that the main thing I've done is just brighten up the brighter areas. So the curve there is just pulled it up a little bit at the top end, a tiny little bit down the bottom end, but hardly any adjustment there at all. I didn't need a full S curve on that because the darks are already quite pronounced. So just brightening up this sort of brighter area here, enhancing the sort of vignette effect. So with just a few very simple photos, you know, you don't need great technique and lots of equipment to take these kind of photos. These are just photos of everyday objects that you could find in all sorts of places, easy images to take, and then playing around with the blending modes and masking bits out, you can just create something a little bit artistic like this. A little bit of fun, perhaps. This isn't the sort of thing that I generally tend to do, but I do find it a little bit of fun to have a go at these things every so often, and hopefully that will inspire you to try it yourself. So photograph your subject so it's got a bit of room around it. It's a bit of clear space that you can use for the texture, that you can fill in with color and patterns that you're getting in the background. Photograph any kind of textures and colors and things you can see around, patterns that you might be able to then use to blend in with your original image. And I think that that final image does look a little bit more interesting than just the very plain still life that we've got there. Not to everybody's taste, perhaps, but you know, it's art, so produce what you enjoy, and hope this inspires you to have some fun. I'm Joe Lenton. Thank you very much for watching.